Hi everyone, I'm the Rambling Photon, and this is going to be a bit of departure for me because this is a scripted video, or at least semi-scripted. So I've been thinking about the way that I think about the culture war, and how to express it and the tactics that are used for it. And there are many dimensions to think about in the culture war, so hopefully this will organize my thoughts and help both me and you understand it a little better. So first, we can think of and visualize it in some pictures. The first is that we have a map of the ideological space, and there are going to be two or more camps. But for now, let's just think about the case of two, and so we can extrapolate from there. Simpler and all that with just two. Call these position A and position B. Now let's posit as our goal, as the good and righteous holders of position A, it is to bring as many people in society as close to position A as we can, and that our ideological opponents, the heathens that hold position B, are trying to do the same. Okay? What tactics do we want to employ to win? Okay? To bring the most people to our position. So first we can define people that are close to our position to be generally on our side. They might not be exactly in position A, but they're trying to bring people more or less closer to position A. There are similar people around position B. Now, the further out from the point we get, the closer we get to what I call the neutrals. These are people who have either not formed an opinion on the topic yet, either because they haven't thought about it much, or they don't care, or any number of other reasons. Or people who haven't formed an opinion about it, but they don't hold it very strongly and are willing to change. This is the landscape for the culture war. We have two poles which are trying to draw in the neutrals, basically. Sort of an example of this would be, if you think about it in the context of Kekistan, we have position A, which is Kekistan, we have position B, which is Kakistan, and then we have the neutrals or the normies. Okay, rough approximation. Okay, just an example of how you can fit this framework to a particular case. Now, there are an assortment of tactics that can be used, and for this I think about this on another axis, the nice, nasty axis. Think of this as the axis of civility. Every tactic that is used to convince someone is going to lie on this axis somewhere. Okay, a civil conversation, which is a little funny, etc., is going to be nice, whilst indiscriminately killing people is going to be one of the nastiest. Okay. Systematic rape and genocide would be, sort of a little bit nastier, but that's sort of the extreme case. Okay, a more moderate nasty tactic would be like insulting people, or character assassination, calling them a bigot, for example. Others might range from minor civil disruption to assault and battery, to more extreme violence as mentioned before. In general, I think nice tactics are more likely to bring in neutrals to at least listen to your points, while light, nasty tactics, insults, and other verbal abuse can be used to reinforce in-group bias. Basically, if you make fun of the other guy, you can all socially bond over making fun of how stupid your opponents are. The problem with nasty tactics is they tend to be polarizing, so they can serve to strengthen your opponent's position also. And I'll get into a little bit more depth on this in a little bit. So now there's going to be a distribution of people between the two positions, A and B. And in general, the aggregate of people will be closer to one than the other. We consider this to be sort of like the zeitgeist, or the feeling of the population. Even if the population is very polarized, there can be sort of multiple zeitgeists, one for position A or one for position B. Different tactics are going to exert different pressures on people in the system. Depending where they are, they can push or pull people closer or farther from positions A or B. If you are in or close to position A, you want to take action that pulls people into position A, clearly. Now, in this system, each individual can exert some push or pull. The social reach that a person has determines who else feels their push or pull. Proximity and position might correlate, since people seem to gather in groups that hold similar positions. But they don't have to, obviously. The mainstream media clearly has a great reach, And the social media has a different reach, sort of different network effects. Okay, now back to tactics. How do nice tactics affect people? My contention, my hypothesis, I suppose, would be that nice tactics provide an avenue for change, but they don't actually always force it. It might be that for some people, but not others. You might have a nice political discussion with a friend that leaves both of you with a more nuanced view of the topic, but you don't necessarily change position just because of that. So that's what nice tactics do. They present the option. They open doors, but they don't always pull people through them. It can clarify a position of somebody who is uninformed, okay, but not somebody who has staked out a point or staked out a position. You can think of this as, if we go back to our network of people's positions, if somebody's uninformed, there's sort of the cloud of uncertainty of where they feel like they are, but they don't necessarily know where they are yet. And you can, by having a discussion with them, further pin down the position within that cloud and get them to sort of commit maybe to closer to position A or position B. Okay? The nice tactics that make the most difference in my initial estimation would be art. And good art that is well executed can make people see and relate to other people on an emotional level, which can lend credence to a particular position. And again, opens doors and allows the challenging of assumptions, but that's a topic for another video. What about what I'm calling nasty tactics? For that, I think we have a different scale to consider on the axis of nice-nasty. So we have positions A and B still, but we have the tolerance of nastiness of the individual. Why the individual? Because each person has a different scale and tolerance for what I'm simply calling nastiness. Each person has their own moral scale, in a sense. Note here that I'm not making any claims as to the existence or non-existence of a universal morality. That's a subject for a different video. But each person has a sense of what they find acceptable. So, thinking in this nice-nasty axis, a person will have a view of which position has the moral high ground. So this moral high ground is occupied by the position that the individual thinks can engage in nastier activity than the other and still be tolerated. For example, in the anti-feminist feminist debate, I think most neutrals would give the moral high ground to feminists because they assume it means, equality for women or something similar, and most people will support that. A moral high ground to the people who at least claim to hold that position. And then with this moral high ground, they can use ad hominems and character assassination attacks, which might be considered nasty to most people, but they end up finding it acceptable because they have enough high enough moral high ground, in a sense, to get away with just calling random people misogynists. It's almost a form of social capital. Okay, so back to the nice-nasty axis. I think it would be centered or zeroed around each person's acceptability point. And we can set the zero wherever we want because it's arbitrary anyway. So, how does somebody lose the moral high ground? I would posit that they can do so by getting caught using a nasty tactic that is over the line, that is unacceptable even with the moral superiority. Okay? Now, it's not going to lose them the moral superiority immediately. It's just going to sort of start to tip it back to sort of in the direction of neutral or in the direction of their opponents. They're not going to just lose it immediately. Now, every action that is taken in the unacceptable will move them further and further down, so that tactics that were once acceptable become unacceptable. So if you think of this as tilting positions A and B around the acceptability point, okay, so that people closer to a certain position against those in the other position end up becoming, sort of gaining acceptable tactics. So one extreme example would be war. Okay, so obviously killing people is morally unacceptable. But if you are the one who is responding, the moment that some nation invades you, for example, it becomes morally acceptable to start killing them back, right? So this is just a sort of a quick example. What happens there is that the attack tips the moral high ground, at least in the view of the people holding the attacked country, right? So that violence against the aggressor becomes acceptable. Okay, so how do we move people from one position to another? Okay, well, I think the answer might be the narrative, or one of narrative. So to move people from one position to another, you can illustrate the morally unacceptable things that people of the opposing position, those vile heretics in position B, are doing to people who do not deserve it, and similarly do not do anything that the neutrals, or the vast majority of neutrals, would consider unacceptable. Okay? Doing unacceptable things will move them away from your position. Okay? Are there cases where these nasty tactics might be useful, even if they are unacceptable to the other side? Yes. As I've talked about before, there are elements of nastiness that can serve to shore up the in-group, and I think a big one is humor. If you can get people unified laughing at position B, I think it will sort of form a community and a sense of shared experience and common culture. The problem is that it also entrenches your opposition, and if you're looking to engage on a civil level, that's not going to help. Or if you're looking to de-escalate on the nasty scale, it's not really going to help. And this is something I think we can observe looking at ponage videos as compared to the more intellectual and civil videos. Ponage videos are going to be more popular because people like seeing their position reinforced and laughing at the other position, but it disinclines your opposition to possibly listen to you and have the doors opened to get people moving from position B out into either neutrals or even all the way to position A. I think the real conversions, red pills if you will, come from highlighting the problematic aspects used by the other side. You need to make sure that the behavior being highlighted will be unacceptable to the neutrals that you are trying to convert. In some perverse sense, this is why spin and optics are so important. If you're able to portray your opponents in an unacceptable way, or rather, portray what they do as unacceptable, you can move people towards your side, and your opponents can do something similar, and spin your videos or your comments or anything badly in order to do so. And so this highlights the topic of lying, and the problem with lying is that it at first appears acceptable until people find out that it's a lie, at which point that tips everything away. Okay, so lying is unacceptable, but it's only unacceptable if they find out about it. If you can demonstrate that the other side is lying, you can take the moral high ground from them. Okay, so I've rambled long enough. In conclusion, I'm using this framework to think about culture and cultural movements. Note that I have tried to avoid making value judgments about the tactics and cultures and positions. And we should be able to apply this type of framework in a neutral way. Nice tactics are useful for opening doors and opening the path to your position, but nasty tactics are really, really good at driving people away from your position if they find out about it. So leave your thoughts in the comments. If you like my content, like, share, subscribe, all that shit. I've been the Rambling Photon. Hope to catch you next time.